Hi, this is my review of Tank Duel, Enemy in the Crosshairs, published by GMT. It's in a really chunky box, and if we have a look at the back here, its complexity is the lower end of medium, which I would agree with. So solitaire suitability is high, also agree with that as well. So I'm going to start off with the playbook. This basically is the first half is a tutorial, which painstakingly goes through turn by turn a 4-player example, shows you the tank cards that we'll have a look at in a minute and how you use those, shows you all the cards and how you're using those in this example. And as you can see, it's full colour, it's nicely laid out, it's very well written. This is a great way to learn to play the game. It does take a little while, probably sort of half an hour I guess, to go through the example that they give, and the best way to do that is to lay the table out and literally read the sections and pull the cards. It is, I would describe this game very much as sort of an abstract tank battle game. Yes, this is very well written. So you basically, to learn the game, yeah, I would recommend going through this, and as you can see, there's pages and there's quite a bit of it, but it does talk you through all the key mechanics. It talks you through how you move your tanks, even though it's abstract. Talks you through how you target, spot, target, fire at the enemy tanks, and a lot of the other actions that you can do. It's incredibly, it's really good, but it is something. I found this the best way to learn the game. This is not a game that you're going to open up and start playing straight away. You do need to put a little bit of preparation in for as well. Then you get some advanced optional rules. Don't need to talk too much about this. I have used some of them. Then you have all the different scenarios. There are kind of what I'll call gameplay scenarios, which is mostly when I've played the game with other people, mostly what we use. There's some different examples of those. And then you have, I don't think I've gone past it. Oh yeah, there's the historical scenarios. I've tended to, even though I play a lot of historical games, and history is a great passion of mine, tended not to use these, mainly because when I play this game with other people, it's a fun, slightly abstract sort of battle game, rather than a historical simulation, I would describe. It's not that at all. Then you get onto the solitaire rules and how you play the game of solitaire. Again, this is very extensive, very comprehensive. I've played the game solitaire using their rules, no problems at all. Rabata is really good, and then you get an example of solitaire play as well. So, and again, the best way to learn solitaire is to go through that. You've got historical notes, player design notes as well. This is a great book. It's quite a few pages, sort of 50 pages. Shows you probably you do need to put a little bit of time into the game before you start playing. Then we have the rule book. So the rule book's an interesting one. It's really well written, and it's extensive, and it includes everything you need. There is a tendency, I guess, because I play a lot of war games, that initially I started with the rule book, and it does say stop, don't read the rule book, read the tutorial book, and I kind of went yeah, carried on reading the rule book, and yeah, they're absolutely right. It is very hard to learn the game reading the rule book. It is a million times easier to learn the game using that playbook. The rules are written in quite a logical sense from a rules point of view, maybe less from a usability point of view. Every single rule is in here, and this is, in a way, it's more like an extended reference, I would describe, for when you're playing the game. If you're not sure quite how something works, it absolutely will be in here, and they are very well written. It is very extensive for a game that is pretty straightforward, to be fair. They do a good job of sort of highlighting what, not only the rule, but then what they call the important section here, which is basically a really high-level summary that actually is kind of the crux of it, really, of that particular rule. Well written, very well laid out, normal GMT quality as you'd expect. Great index, thank you for including that. I have used that multiple times. So in conclusion to the rule books, this is, in my opinion, this is a great reference. That's how you learn to play the game. The one thing I would say is the first time I played the game, I read through this, played it out, then played a game. It was brilliant. And then left the game for maybe a month or 6 weeks or something like that. Came back to the game, thought to myself, well, I've read that, don't need that no more. I'll just go to the rule book and just re-familiarise myself with the rule book. Yeah, that didn't work. I kind of had to go back to that and read through that examples of play. Not every bit, but the first few pages, just to re-familiarise myself with how the game worked. And that's mostly because the game's quite abstract. It's not a hex encounter wargame like I normally play, or an area control wargame that I normally play, or a solitaire narrative games that I normally play. And because of that, it's quite a unique experience, which is great. Flip side of that is you do need to sort of re-familiarise yourself with the rules until you've got them down, unless you're playing it regularly. If you're playing it every week at a game level, something like that, no problem. But I tend to play a game, often might sit on the shelf then for a few months or a few weeks, or some combination, and then get it out again and want to play again. And I found that, again, it's called rules of play. Really, you can learn everything in the playbook, I'll be honest with you. Next up, these are the sort of tank mats or tank cards, or whatever you want to call them. You get a stack of these for a whole bunch of different tanks and armour, tank destroyers from World War II on the Eastern Front. So it's Soviets and Axis. These are great, and you get, like I said, you get a massive stack of them. So we've got T-35 with an 85mm gun. They're double-sided. SU-100, that's a sort of a tank destroyer. T-34 with a 76mm gun, so a less powerful gun. On the flip side of this, KV-85, another Soviet tank, another T-34, and some of them are kind of in the normal sort of green camo, well, not camo, but green colour scheme. Some of them are sort of a whitewashed colour scheme as well, which is nice. And you get tons and tons and tons of them. So you can play the game with a lot of... the most I've played this is 4 against 4. We've got some Axis, so we've got Panther here, for example. On the flip side of the Panther, Panzer III, yeah, Panzer III, for example, as well. So a whole bunch of what we got here. Another Panzer III, but in a different camo scheme, and then a Panther as well. So a massive stack of different mats with different Axis armour. Like I said, it's all Eastern Front, so Axis and Soviets. These are well laid out. They have key components of information. They have, like I said, movement's abstract. So instead of movement, you have range, and it's basically the range from the center point of the battle. So you might start at 800 and then work your way closer and closer towards the center point, and therefore closer and closer to the enemy. The movement and firing, which enables you to place cards, initiative, where the initiative card goes, and all sort of the combat table that you need. This game, this is really the crux of the game, these mats. There is no map, there are no hexes, there's nothing like that at all. Each player will have one of these. You can play, 2-player with each player having multiple tanks. I've generally found the magic number for the number of tanks one player can kind of manage in a game is about 2. You can play 3, I think, or more, I suppose, when you're more experienced with the game. But initially, I'd recommend just 1 tank each, or 2 tanks if there's only 2 of you playing. I would say a good game is 4 tanks a minimum, so 2v2. So if you're playing 2-player, you've both got to manage 2 tanks. Next up, player aid. You get a stack of these because it's a multiplayer game. Its focus really is on a large number of players playing the game. Player aid is great. You're going to use this a lot. It's double-sided, so on this side you've basically got the turn, and as you can see, the turn is quite on paper it's quite lengthy. In practice it's much quicker. So you have a draw phase, which is where you draw new cards. Initiative phase, each player picks one of those cards which has a value, and the lowest value gets initiative. Then you take it in turn. The administration steps, if the tank's on fire, you'll check to see what happens with that. Your action step, which is actually the biggest thing really, which is basically where you're playing those cards to move your tanks, acquire targets and shoot at them for the most part. Move into cover as well, I would say. It is a good summary of how firing against the enemy tank works. It's very straightforward. On the flip side of this, you have a summary of all the key actions that a tank can do. So like I said, firing and moving into terrain, they're really the key things. Then you have leadership cards that enable you to do extra things like go hold down or try and spot an enemy tank. And then there's even, you know, occasional things you might do, like try and flank an enemy or use smoke, for example. These are incredibly useful. You do get a stack of them, 1 per player, so even if you're playing with a lot of people, you get enough player raids, which is awesome. There's also a Rabata player aid, so if you're playing the game single, you're playing solitaire against the Rabata, there's a whole player aid for that, which again is great. I've played it solitaire a couple of times, played the Rabata and played it two-handed just to see the difference. It's incredibly useful, talks you through step by step everything that you need. A great summary. Again, you'll be using that quite extensively if you're playing against the Rabata. Next up, the battle cards. These and your tank card, fundamentally that's the game in a nutshell. Each player gets a number of these, depending on their range from the centre point of the battlefield. The closer you get, the more cards you get effectively. But for the most part, you'll be getting 4 cards. You use 1 to bid on initiative, which is a great mechanic, for example, and then you use these cards to perform actions. So for example, this is a move, it moves your tank. Whilst you're moving, you'll be spotted by the enemy, as you'd expect. This is a fire, that's convenient. This is a fire command action, sorry. This enables you to fire at the enemy. By and large, those 2 cards, you're going to be using those plenty. Moving your tank, moving it into cover. There's a flank card, for example, enables you to flank the enemy. You get an advantage then for combat. This is a terrain card. This is mud. This you put onto your enemy, and they get no surprise, they get stuck in the mud, which makes them easier to hit. More move cards, for example. Loads of move cards in this game. As you can see, there's some rubble. This is terrain. So while you're moving your tank, at some point you're going to want to move it into terrain. The reason you want to do that is while you're moving, it's much harder for you to fire and hit things. So move your tank, move it into terrain. When it's in the terrain, it has some cover. Then you can start shooting at the enemy, providing you can spot them. And you spot them by playing the sort of cards that enable you to spot, or the fact that they move and that they might shoot at you, which gives their position away, as you'd expect. It is a very straightforward system. It is as simple as that. You literally, every turn, you get given some cards, you play those cards tell you what to do. The player rate that I showed you has the information as well, and if you really need to check for the first few times, then you can check in the rules, which again, as I said, is really more of a great big sort of detailed player aid, effectively. The other cards you're going to be using quite a lot. is the damage card. The damage cards used in combat. Combat is straightforward. You have to be able to spot the enemy, so you have to be able to get eyes on them. You then fire to hit. If you hit, it's easier to hit at shorter ranges, as you'd expect. You then have to penetrate, so you then roll to see where you roll. So you can play too many hex and counter games. You basically just work out where you've hit and you draw a card for that. The card has a target number, that's number 5, and that will indicate on their sheet where you've hit them in the turret, the tracks, or the main chassis. If you hit, you then put another card to see if you've penetrated. There's a penetration modifier on the card. Depending on the weapon of your tank and their armor, depends what you need to know if you've penetrated or not. If you penetrate, you then pick one of these damage cards. You can get critical hits. You can blow them up in one hit. Done that plenty of times. Or secondary damage, or primary damage. That might kill some of your crew or set your tank on fire. My advice is, by going through that playbook, you'll go through a round of combat. It is as these type of World War II war games go. This is a very straightforward. It is, it's slightly abstracted. It's not a simulation of tank combat in World War II at all, but it gives you enough. Certainly, from a gameplay point of view, it's really fun. Shooting at each other's tanks, trying to spot them, move around, get into cover is brilliant fun. But it is, it's on the more, it's slightly abstracted, and it's more emphasis is on the card play and the fun than the simulation side of it, I would say. So this is an example actually of a playing against a friend, and basically stopped the game just to shoot this video quickly. And this is an example. We've got a game set up here. We've got 2 Soviet tanks, 2 T-34s with 76mm guns against a Panzer IV and a Stug. One of the nice things about this game is playing it with friends who know very little about World War II tanks. Doesn't matter. It's a fun game, and the emphasis is on fun. I think the emphasis is on multiplayer as well. So, for example, on this, let's pick this T-34 just here. My bid card for the initiative was 78. This one is the third tank to be used this turn. That tank had initiative, bid lower number, got the initiative. You bid the number basically by choosing one of the cards from your 4 cards that you dealt. Then this tank would go next, because that's a bid of 77, 78. Oh, that's actually 46, so that would go second, then that one, then that one. The move level and the fire level, you get little counters for those. So, for example, this tank's moved, its move is 1. That means it needs a move level below that, which it has. It doesn't actually move 1, it just that's the number you need. That's the range, so it's 800 away from the centre point of the battle. These are my crew. They're all fine, none of them have been injured yet, or they're dead. This particular tank has spotted tank 2, the opponent's side, which is this one here. So that T-34 has spotted that Stug there. And effectively, that's how the game plays. If I wanted to fire that T-34 against that Stug, I would need a card that enabled me to do that. If it did, I'd look at the range, which is basically my range and their range added together. Tells me what I need to hit. I roll a dice. Said it again. I pick a card, and that will tell me if the number, if they're lower than I've hit. Then I do the same thing for penetration. So, as you can see, mostly cards. Not a huge footprint with 2 tanks versus 2 tanks. I've squished these together a little bit actually, to the sake of the camera. You'll probably play a little bit more spaced out. You'd have your card decks and all your counters and tokens that you need. And everything's high quality as you'd expect. All the counters punch really nice. The cards look great. The art of the tanks look great. Everything is a high quality product, as you'd expect from GMT. So some closing thoughts about what I like about the game. 1, you get a lot of tanks. It's great. I love the, as most of you will know, I have a particular love of tanks and armour. It's a good selection of tanks as well, from the Eastern Front, which is wonderful. Everything is high quality. All the cards look great, all the artwork looks great, everything's nicely laid out. The rule books are great, they're easy to follow, easy to read, great reference point. All the player aids are great. Every single component of this game is super high quality, and you get a lot for your money. You get a big stack of different tanks, so there's some variety there for replayability. You get a lot of scenarios again. I played a handful of those. What I love about this game is that it's light, it's straightforward, and it is fun. This is a fun tank battling game. There's enough for me because the art looks great and I know these tanks very well. For me, who's really interested in history, that's perfect. I have played against people who know really nothing about tanks and they enjoy it just as much as I do. And that is because it is a card-driven game. The gameplay is all around the cards. It's not about how much you know about this period of history, for example. The other thing I would say as well, it's very newcomer friendly. I've played with people that don't normally play World War II board war games, and they've enjoyed it. And if you've played it a lot and you play against someone who's never played it before, it's a good example of a balanced game, I would say. And it's because it's card driven, you know. For someone who's played it a lot, they'll have an advantage, of course they will. But it's very newcomer friendly and they stand a fighting chance. The other thing I should point out is if your tank gets knocked out, it's no problem. You get another tank, exactly the same one, you just reset everything, they get victory points, so there's no downtime. In fact, actually one of the great things about this game, the downtime between your turn, your actions and your opponent's actions is very quick. So it plays quick, it's got a really good momentum to it. It is just, the real emphasis is on fun. I read I think an interview with the designer and they were, you know, inspired by the World of Tanks video game, and you can see that in this is enough historical content in here and reference, but it's light, doesn't get in the way of the gameplay in any way, shape or form. There's enough there for people who do, you know, who do like that, I would say. Just about, you know, it's definitely on the light sense. And it is an awesome game to play with 4+ players. That's its sweet spot for me, because the downtime is so quick, it's so card driven. All the mechanics are streamlined. Once you've played like a few cards and moved used the move and moved into terrain and shot a few, you know, honestly, it's very straightforward, which is awesome, and very high components. So yeah, I love this game. Playing it solitaire, I think it lost a little bit, I'll be honest with you. You can play it solitaire. I played it solitaire to learn the game, and I played it solitaire to sort of remember the game, and it did that well for me. But it's not a narrative-driven solitaire game like the Queen of the Skies type narrative-driven solitaire games. It's just not. It's not meant to be. It's not trying to be that. This is a multiplayer 2, 4, 6 player tank battling game that you can play in an hour. That is a lot of fun, and that's its sweet spot. Yeah, that's what I love about it. That's it. Thanks for watching.